Please welcome Deborah, Dennis, and Elizabeth to SAPEX 2018.
In many clinics in rural areas across this continent, more often than not, essential and life-saving medicines are not available for the families who need them. This leads to poor health outcomes, less healthy populations, and slower economic growth. At the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we believe that every person deserves a chance to live a healthy, productive life. Strong healthcare systems play a major role in this, and supply chains are critical so that product is available where it's needed. As you probably know, both Bill and Melinda were computer scientists before dedicating their lives to ending extreme poverty. So both strongly believe that technology has a role to play in reducing burdens on populations. Some of that burden is this: empty shelves. People can't get what they need, and often this impacts health-seeking behavior. If somebody can't get the medicine they need because it's consistently not on the shelf, they actually stop going to the doctor. So supply chain impacts the entire health system. Let's explore. By the end of our presentation, you'll have a better idea of the challenge and opportunity ahead of us, and how we are exploring using AI to create even more opportunities. And all of this gets me thinking, what could happen in the next 5 years if the power of the commercial sector's talent, knowledge, and technology could be leveraged to help those most in need? First, though, there are differences between the supply chains we support in global health and development and the supply chains you probably manage in commercial. In order for the leveraged solutions to actually be useful, it's important to grasp these differences. So let's quickly look at 5 major differences between commercial and development. Let's start the exploration where we always start in supply chain, with demand. The first difference is a challenge in seeing demand. Demand for medicines can happen at pharmacies, informal drug shops, or at government-owned clinics, like this hospital in rural Tanzania. After somebody sees the doctor, they often need to go to the pharmacy. And this is the point that the supply chain cares about. Here, demand pulls on the supply chain, and if we could just capture this moment, we'd be in a good place for planning and execution. But have a look. Do you see a scanner, a computer, a phone? I see a tablet of paper. Here we see a challenge in seeing a demand signal and even getting this moment captured. So for me, it gets me thinking about process, which takes us to the second major difference. It can be summed up by assumptions. We make several assumptions about supply chain process. We probably don't even realize we're making them. For example, if somebody on your team drops an order to the warehouse, you assume it'll get picked. You assume that product has a SKU and a barcode, and that barcode probably follows an international standard. Our assumptions about supply chain processes are a difference between commercial and development. We make several assumptions, for example, that the supply chain process works. But the processes that support these supply chains have unnecessary levels of complexity. Replenishment cycles are very long. It might be months in between deliveries, which puts the supply chain in a very poor position to react to demand, which we can't really see anyway. Credit is not usually offered, which causes small order quantities or delays in ordering at all. So we assume the process works. We also assume the process is visible. We assume we can see the supply chain, but visibility to inventory and data is often still a future aspiration. We assume the process is quality. Quality in pharmaceuticals is a big challenge. 1 in 12 drugs sold in the world is counterfeit. In African markets, it's more like 1 in 6. So what about partnerships? And this brings us to our third major difference, barriers to partnership. When I think about partnerships, they can be one-to-one or one-to-many. a barrier in development is almost all the partnerships are many to many. There are many organizations like mine, working with many other organizations trying to help country governments. But in this environment, who makes the decision? There are dozens of organizations working together. Some buy the product, some move it, some manage it, and some benefit from it. I see this difficulty in decision-making to be a barrier to partnership. But where's all the supply chain talent? This is the fourth major difference between commercial and development, the expectations we have for talent. We expect talent to be available, we expect talent to be trained, and we expect talent to be connected. We find trained talent is scarce. In 2013, 2 researchers from the University of Johannesburg found that the shortage of supply chain talent in South Africa is one of the major constraints on this country's overall competitiveness. We expect talent to be connected through conferences, workshops, or meetings, like the one we're all at right now. But conferences don't really exist yet in the countries I focus on for supply chain professionals. So we've explored a few differences: challenges in seeing demand, assumptions in process, barriers to partnerships, and expectations in talent. Now let's look at one more: constraints. Every supply chain has constraints. The difference in development is the types of constraints that these supply chains experience. Here we see infrastructure constraints. Something I think about a lot is that in commercial, the supply chain could always find money, cost savings, and help with financial goals. But these supply chains have resource constraints. They often don't know what they're spending at all, and often don't practice financial management. The financial constraints are very real. Another constraint is the continued use of paper. So instead of a digital point of sale, we have this. Often very detailed records about demand and on-shelf inventory. But almost all information that exists about demand at any point in the supply chain is here. There are millions, if not billions, of sheets of paper in resource-constrained environments that have the story that demand is trying to tell us. But it goes here. So, given all of these differences, what role could AI possibly have to play? Before delving into AI, first, a note on inclusive design. As we go through this presentation, it's an interesting approach to keep in mind. Microsoft uses this approach of inclusive design to product development. We have partnered with one of their leaders in this space, Margaret Price. She helps us understand that we often design based on our own experiences and biases. She shared with us that many of the innovative products we know well were originally designed as an edge case. For example, almost 100 years ago, the bendy straw was invented because a father watched his young daughter struggle to use a normal straw and modified it for her. And now it's a mainstream item. In the 70s, nascent email protocols were created for a man to communicate with his wife, who was deaf. Also in the 70s, closed captioning was first demonstrated at the first national conference on television for the hearing impaired. Now, most videos I watch on my phone all have closed captioning, so I don't need to turn on the volume. These demonstrate that inclusive design can take an edge case to a mainstream, widely used product. The way that Margaret describes product design reminds me of process design. And if we consider my use cases as edge cases and design for those, perhaps we'll have widespread, innovative uses of AI in supply chains around the world. Here's a framework that Microsoft uses. You see different physical abilities, and across the top, different states: permanent, temporary, situational. For touch, for example, we see a permanent state of someone with one arm, a temporary state of an arm injury, and a situational state of a new parent holding a baby. As products are designed for people with one arm, no longer is it just for those in the permanent state, rather for everyone who may experience one arm, just for a moment. Similarly, we can see the other senses. So what does this have to do with AI and supply chain? Well, if we consider some of the constraints that we feel, perhaps there's something we can learn. So while I don't have cute pictures like Margaret does, here's a few thoughts. As we face continued labor shortages, so do all organizations at some point. Perhaps someone's on annual leave, or there's a specific skill set that's needed. At rural clinics we serve, they may not have connectivity. And similarly, we've all experienced a lack of Wi-Fi at some point. So in this way, as we explain our constraints, take a look inside your own supply chain and see where there may be a surprising overlap. Now, on to AI. The industry is talking about AI and supply chain in two ways. First, augmentation, where AI supports humans in their task by reducing some burden, providing additional information, connecting dots, and making recommendation. Second, automation, where the AI is in the driver's seat and the process can run without the need for human intervention. The majority of our examples will focus on augmentation. And while AI is normally about the technology, we will focus this discussion on people and improving their experience. I argue that the supply chains we support are an even better candidate for AI than mature commercial supply chains. While there are a few different players in the market, IBM's Watson, Microsoft's Cortana, Google's Alexa, these examples focus on IBM's Watson. This is because IBM started teaching Watson supply chain a few years ago. So Watson has a head start in understanding the relationship of supply chain terms and data objects and the context of our field. This first example is all about people. As discussed, one of the differences between commercial and development is supply chain talent. Most public health supply chains are staffed by pharmacists and medical doctors, and supported by teams who have masters in public health. So while supply chain professionals can make their own way through solving supply chain problems, often the staff in our supply chains don't have the same frames of reference. This makes an interesting use case for AI. So as we look at a community called the International Association for Public Health Logisticians, we start to see the first use case emerge. With augmentation, we enable teams to have more opportunities. Listen in these examples for clues about giving people more opportunities to access more information, access historical knowledge, access the supply chain in different ways, and access a guided experience. Now, inviting Liz to come and share her experiences with IAPHL and Watson.
Thank you very much. So the International Association for Public Health Logisticians is a platform that was created 11 years ago to support people operating supply chains in the kind of supply chain that Deborah just described. People who are not professional logisticians, who were mainly medical staff, that had the responsibility to implement supply chains in very many sites in the global south. Now, who are we? We are a group of people who operate supply chain on the ground for public health commodities in general. And we're about 5,500. I think the last time I checked was almost 5,600, but 5,500 is a good estimate. We are in 144 countries, and we handle all sectors of health. So members come from different sectors of healthcare, and they handle all kinds of commodities. Now, more than 2/3 of our members are from the global south. again, just taking that thread that Deborah threw out of the skill sets, specialists working in supply chain. But these are people who work in the Global South. Most of our members are these kind of supply chain operators and managers. So what do we do? After people are sometimes trained, when you go to, all of us who work in development, we go into a country or a locality, we train some of the staff to handle supply chain activities, but then when they go back to their desk and they encounter the first challenge, there's nobody to check in with. There's nobody to ask questions. So we thought IAPHL will provide that platform where people can go back and say, I tried to do my forecast this way, but I got something far out of what I thought I would get. I'm trying to collect data, but I'm struggling. Nobody's keeping data or submitting them on time. And even when they do, the data is poor quality. All of those kind of questions. And have members give them guides, solutions to sort of improve their work. And once their work is improved, the systems improve. And ultimately, the goal of this, our work and all the work of other supply chain people is to make sure that people get the medicines that they need when they need them, so that our health is improved and wellness is improved in our community. So we also provide opportunities and, for training and job postings, those kind of things. We do moderated discussions to make sure members have a chance to learn, find some learning in supply chain while they do their work. And here is a picture of a group of logisticians that had just been trained in Nigeria many years ago. So it is an association that allows everybody in. We don't charge fees, no fees are charged. Communication is by email so that everybody, no matter where they live, in general, have access to emails and communications on that platform. People at all levels of the supply chain, as I mentioned before, are included. Now, we not only have the platform, the global platform of the International Association of Public Health Logisticians, we have the country chapters. So we have about 7 country chapters where there's a chance for face-to-face communication and learning, and they have portals on the listserv. Now, together, the International Association and the country chapters provide learning for members. And together, we're hoping that they can navigate new trends, new learnings, trends like using data and analytics, trends like introducing technologies that have been tried and tested, public sector approaches that work, moving from full donor funding to government funding, and then moving on from government-operated to combination of government and private partners operation. Yesterday, Ian Batson mentioned that there's as much as 37% savings when you combine private sector approaches with government infrastructure to make sure that supply chains are more effective. So, where is all of this? How is all of this connected to AI? Now, from what I mentioned and from what Deborah has talked about, there are a number of issues and challenges. One of the biggest one is using the data we collect to make decisions. Just building that culture of using data and maintaining and keeping that culture, it's an issue, it's a challenge in the area that we work. Other challenges include infrastructure, of course. Those are the big ones. But in terms of what AI can do, just data, how to use that data, how to keep it. Influencing skills. are we able to create the environment that people, that supports improving supply chain? Do our members or do operators know enough to go back to their bosses, talk to them about the value and the benefit of improving or investing in supply chain or creating the policies that support supply chain improvement? Are they able to do that? So that's where I think AI comes in. So first of all, at the very basic level, a couple of years ago, we started using automatic translations into 4 different languages. So if you're communicating on IPHL platform, you can read your emails in Spanish, English, French, or Portuguese, depending on which one you're comfortable with. And then last year, with support from Bill and Melinda Gates, Deborah's team, we worked with Watson, IBM Watson team, they were working on the proof of concept, and they were able to access our data. We gave them our data, they took a look at it, and we really got this very interesting insight that they provided to us. And I love talking about this. They found that IPHL was an unusually and outstandingly positive environment for communication and for learning. So we started thinking, how can we put this to use? What should we do to leverage this interesting, outstanding, positive circumstance? So we're thinking of mentorship webinars that build on and try to find solutions to those issues that we enumerated. Influencing skills, business skills, aside from core supply chain skills, forecasting, warehousing, and the rest, we want to focus on those skills that allow our members to create environments that support the growth of health supply chains. We also have a few things we're thinking about, exploring what ifs, a few of our what ifs. What if we're able to get IBM Watson to place a chatbot on our platform so that when people ask questions, they not only get responses from people, but they get responses from the chatbot who can engage them on a one-on-one, back-and-forth conversation to improve their learning in areas that they express challenges with. And what if Watson and KEMSA, he's going to come back, and IPHL collaborates to begin to implement a platform, an ARC, by the way, implement a platform in Kenya where members learn from Watson, and it's shared between the number of communities that are working with what Dennis is going to describe for you in a moment. Another what if Watson is able to highlight for us those areas where people keep repeatedly asking questions, perhaps indicating that our trainings, as they exist today, have gaps, and then we can begin to use that information to inform the development of curriculums going forward. And my last what if Watson is an EPIC certified AI, and therefore the responses that we get on our platform while it's there are of that cutting-edge, world-class level, so that our members get the kind of information that they need to join the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. So important to highlight one of the features of AI, which is the cognitive abilities. Machines can communicate to humans. Once a machine understands the words and terms that are important to supply chain, For example, the fact that SKU, part, and NO dot are referring to the same thing. What is inventory? Why is it important? What are the benefits of holding inventory? Once a machine understands these basics and their relationship to other basics, it can read and consume large amounts of data and text. The benefit of this is what Liz explained, totally new opportunities for those working in supply chain. Think about accessing historical knowledge. Who has struggled when trying to remember, what did we do last time? What did my colleague do before they moved teams? Knowledge management is really, really hard, and also really important if a supply chain will truly improve and sustain those improvements. If our staff is interacting with a machine when reasoning through challenges, the machine will remember. When the scenario is slightly different next time, the machine will remember that too. Who has had to write playbooks or how-to guides on inventory policies, product launches, contract management? Imagine that it builds itself. As you figure out your way, your learnings are captured, organized, and cataloged in real time. In Liz's case, imagine all the individuals who are already interacting on IEPHL do so with the support of AI. Gone are the days of spinning on the same questions over and over just because we can't find the answer that was given last time. So moving on to another example, I'll invite Dennis to share how IBM's team came together with their competitors at E2Open to physically travel from port to health facility in Kenya, scoping opportunities for use cases in digitizing data and applying AI.
Okay, for KEMSA, we are a medical logistics organization under the Ministry of Health, charged with the procurement of medical commodities, warehousing, distribution, and offering supply chain services to our clients, to our customers, who cover, the coverage of these customers is about 7,000 facilities countrywide. And we have a mix of facilities. We have 3 national referral hospitals. We have 97 county referral hospitals. We also have 300 sub-county hospitals and over 6,000 health facilities and dispensaries. So most of these facilities are not digitized. They are operating on manual records and paper-based records. And beginning of December, we had discussions with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we had discussions around getting to have automation being brought to these particular facilities and bringing the element of artificial intelligence to enable the whole supply chain to rely on artificial intelligence on decision making. So we built a prototype that we did within a sprint span of 1 month. And from there, we achieved the necessary approvals that were required for this particular solution to be widened in terms of the scope. So we had to widen the scope, and we got a team from the foundation, we got a team from the E2Open, and we also got a team from the IBM Watson, who came to Kenya, and we did facility visits to a number of counties in Kenya, and specifically on health facilities. And this is one of the facilities in the coastal region that we were able to visit, and most of the dispensaries in Kenya look like this. So One of the things that we learned and the findings that we found on the ground was there was lack of visibility. Upstream, at the level of the county, at the level of the national government, at the level of KEMSA, we do not have visibility of what is really happening on the commodities that are being consumed at the health facilities. So, in addition to that, there was a lot of paperwork, as we are going to see ahead. The other challenge we were able to realize is that there was lack of infrastructure. So, with all these challenges that came about, we had to think outside the box. We had to do business unusual, not business as usual, business unusual, whereby now we have to look at the platforms that we have, look at what we are developing as E2Open and IBM, and bring a solution that is unique to the health sector that will be able to digitize these health records. And what we did, we brought about Watson, whereby now we decided to teach Watson on how to make decisions out of data that has been warehoused within E2Open. So we were able to bring these two organizations together with KEMSA, together with WFP, Bill and Melinda Gates, a number of partners, and we have been working towards achieving this particular goal of ensuring that we move away from the pink papers you can see there that are bin cards and move to Watson and E2Open Dash platforms. So, through Watson, the health worker will be able to know where the commodities are within the county. We have serious challenges of privilege. We have serious challenges of commodities expiring and understocking and overstocking of commodities at the various levels of the facilities. Now, to curb this, we are teaching Watson to be able to communicate to the health workers and give them intelligence in terms of where these commodities could be if the commodities they're serving the patients with are out of stock in their facilities. And they will be able to pinpoint at which facilities have these particular commodities, and also they are able to query the district store, and that is even the national store, which is KEMSA, and they will be able to know what is actually in stock and what is out of stock. So the Watson will also be able to enable the facilities anticipate the orders they're expecting from KEMSA. This is the KEMSA warehouse. As you can see, our warehouse, this is just part of the area where we normally do the consolidation of commodities as we prepare these commodities for shipments. So this time around, we'll have facilities have intelligence and know that we'll be expecting our commodities at this particular time, because the Watson is plugged into the KEMSA KEMSA supply chain key performance indices, which will enable the customer know once the commodities have been picked in our warehouse, when to anticipate the arrival of those commodities and to plan for those commodities for consumption. We also intend to extend this to the level of the patient, so that the patient can be able to also anticipate, especially patients who are on TB commodities and those who are on ARVs can be able to anticipate when to visit the health facility to receive the commodities through Watson. So this is we have the restoration room that runs the platform. We are now capturing structured data and unstructured data, and we have Watson also giving information on the weather and other elements that you may require to know about our country and in terms of distribution. We are also, as I indicated before, that we have the voice message, and the SMS-based message, whereby now you can communicate over the phone, and Watson will be able to tell you where these commodities are located, or the specific question that you are asking, you will be able to, Watson will be able to relate with the information it has stored for purposes of giving knowledge and standards that are required in that particular knowledge area. So in this case, as you can see here, we are querying Watson, and we are asking Watson, what amount of quantities do I have on amoxicillin in a particular area? And Watson will tell me that this particular facility, A, X, B, Y, has this number of quantities of commodities, and you can be able to reach out to this facility so that we can be able to do a redistribution of commodities within the county or within the facilities or within the sub-counties. This will help in minimizing challenges of expiries at the level of the health facilities. So now, what action are we looking at? So we are bringing in the benefits of ensuring that we are able to interpret and the structured data, and also we are empowering KEMSA and all the health workers to be able to rely on this platform, which will be able to give them guidance in terms of the skills that they need, basic skills that they need to be able to implement their supply chain operation or objectives that they are using. And we are also looking at bringing this data into a van. As I mentioned before, we are having the E2Open platform, and we are also having the Watson. Watson sits on the E2Open platform, and E2Open is also pulling data from other different sources of data within the country. That includes our DHIS2, KEMSA systems, and other systems that are in the health sector. Data warehouse this information, and once we have this information, now Watson, we are teaching Watson to rely on this information to be able to advise our health workers on the best practices, on the various standards that are within the supply chain models that are being managed by various supply chain organizations, and offer advisory services and give direction on the best practice that each organization, the best practices that the health worker can adopt so that this particular health worker can be able to gain skills in supply chain management. Thank you.
Who here has ever had to make their own personal list of SAP T codes or something similar? Who has had the experience of having to do VLOOKUP after VLOOKUP just to bring together a few data sets and make sense of it, just to find out where inventory is? In spite of all the advances that have happened in supply chain, it almost always comes down to, where's the stuff? Imagine just asking, either through text or voice. Voice-to-text technology is progressing at lightning speed. But even engaging through a chat or a WhatsApp text allows users to simply ask, where's my shipment? The machine can verify which shipment, what's on it, who is it coming from, and when do you expect it. Then it can go through all the options and help you find it in seconds. AI gives us the opportunity to access the supply chain in different ways, through natural language. AI can also access more information than literally humanly possible. Adding unstructured data, such as weather, to inbound shipment information and combine it with historical supplier performance, we can know in seconds if we should be worried about an important shipment if it'll be late. AI can also help us go through alternatives and be a thought partner in risk management to find new options to help the supply chain perform at its best. These are not future aspirations. This is happening today. Liz and Dennis have shared with you that even small, fast start projects can leverage the technology that's available right now. When we think again about the people who staff our supply chains, they're health professionals. You know, the reason why supply chain professionals can run their supply chains in Excel, even though we don't like to admit it, is because we know supply chain really well. We can do the calculations, we can run the cost benefit, we know the right steps to take. But when I think about health professionals, they don't have the same frames of reference. They need a more guided experience so that they can make good decisions. Imagine having a smart guide, as Liz and Dennis both alluded to, so staff can have confidence in the decisions that they make. As I mentioned, I argue that the supply chains we support are even better candidates for AI than mature commercial supply chains. So what does it look like? This is an output of the analysis that Liz mentioned. And there is her 93% positive sentiment analysis showing that people, in general, are using positive language and positive tone when interacting with each other on IEPHL. We can see the top entities and related concepts. This type of analysis is very rapid to complete. Here we ask Watson about conversations about transportation. 127 threads on IEPHL. It gives some examples of the breakdown and some links it thinks we might find interesting. And this is about transportation delays, and we see a similar type of breakdown. It's with these types of conversations that we can build those live playbooks or how-to guides that I mentioned earlier. And here we see a "where's my stuff" question. The cool thing here is that we can, with one question, also get an Excel output of all the shipments coming in at a certain period of time, often something we need to produce for a coworker. And this reduces effort significantly. So now a few words on automation. Imagine the doctor, nurse, or health worker can just say or text what was used, and the supply chain just works. Now, this could get really cool if we add in things like Internet of Things, sensors, and geotags, but let's think for a moment just about a single trigger event, for example, a demand signal. But we know that getting a digital demand signal is a challenge for us, but Dennis has given us hope. Then the supply chain just works. Imagine a self-driving supply chain. And I don't mean autonomous trucks, although those are happening today. I mean a supply chain that can run on automation. And a quick Google search tells me that we're not the only one considering this concept. But let's go one step further. We know it takes families in rural areas a long time to get to the clinic. It can be 10 or 20 kilometers. To find the time and resource to get all the way to the clinic just to find an empty shelf, what a waste. But imagine that consumers can interact with the supply chain through AI without knowing or needing to know that they are. Imagine she can check the stock levels of what the clinic has and get feedback on it. Perhaps, for example, that they are out of stock, but another clinic equally close or far does have the product. And imagine she can reserve it. This would be an epic transformation in the way people seek healthcare. And it exists today. Who has done a click and collect or buy online pickup in store? The technology exists. Layering on the cognitive abilities of AI allows for even more people to have access to this opportunity. They say necessity is the mother of invention. I don't know a bigger, more important necessity than the basic health needs of these populations. We are exploring how cutting-edge technology in frontier markets and in resource-constrained environments can help teams make better decisions. Using inclusive design, our findings apply broader and can lead to even stronger processes for those mature commercial supply chains. And again, I argue our supply chains in our use cases and in our focus markets should be at the leading edge of technology application. This is the ultimate leapfrog. Constraints lead us to clever solutions, and technology should be there to help. Imagine if the human languages these computers are learning include an African language among their first. English, Mandarin, German, and Swahili, Zulu, and Hausa. Why not? So, keeping our customer in mind, we've given you a brief introduction to the supply chains that we support and how AI can offer new opportunities to augment and automate the supply chain processes. Supply chains in resource-constrained environments look different, and still, AI has a role to play in propelling these supply chains ahead in maturity and in performance. The problems we face are large and complex, and the opportunities are incredible. Imagine if private sector companies like yours joined our community to solve these problems together and unlock new opportunities. Our passion is to help families, and our part is to create stronger supply chains and supply chain markets. Businesses also need strong supply chains. So even if the underlying motivation is different, the outcome is the same: stronger supply chains. Because all lives have equal value, and supply chains play a big role in ensuring every person has the opportunity to live a healthy, productive life. Investing in innovations like AI for supply chains is good for business, good for communities, and good for the world. Thank you.